New information this morning about what President Obama will say tonight in his State of the Union address. CNN has learned that this time around he will talk less about policies and more, we're told, about people and helping the middle class. After the speech, the president plans to visit Idaho and Kansas, which you may notice are red states, to engage people who disagree with him. I'm joined now by Michael Waldman. He was the head speechwriter for President Clinton for years. He wrote 4 State of the Union addresses, or States of the Union, or State of the Unions. I'm not sure what the correct grammar is there. But you are a defender of this speech, which is interesting. You know, the Constitution says that from time to time, the president has to give Congress information on the State of the Union. But there are a lot of people these days saying, go back to sending up a letter, because the speech itself just is a thing of the past.
Yeah, I can't say that I agree with that. I think that's actually wrong. Look, you know, George Washington, John Adams, they used to deliver it in person. Then from Thomas Jefferson forward, he sent it up in writing until the 20th century, when radio and television made the speech something everybody could hear. You're still going to have 30 million people listening to the person they elected as president talking about policy. In this multi-platform age, that's a very big audience. And with turmoil overseas and the economy finally picking up steam, I think there's actually going to be interest in what this president says in this speech. It's the first time he's talking not to a Congress that's divided and dysfunctional, but actually controlled by the other party. That actually makes it a little more relevant, because they can pass things, he can sign them or veto them, and there'll actually be a big debate.
You know, you noted in a column, you know, people say, oh my gosh, you know, how unusual is it that a president in the 6th year or 7th year of his term will be speaking to a Congress from the opposition party? It turns out it's pretty much always the case.
The last time it was otherwise was 1939. It's sort of the rhythm of these things. And sometimes those last 2 years can be a bad time for the president, and sometimes it can be actually very productive. Let me give you an example. There's an actual issue where there's real bipartisan momentum, which you wouldn't expect, which is on criminal justice reform.
Rand Paul, Cory Booker.
Right, and that's something where the president, in the wake of the new attention after Ferguson and everything else, can give an encouragement to that kind of thing. And then there are times when you draw a line, whether it's on something like taxes, or even when he took on the Supreme Court 5 years ago, right after they came down with the Citizens United ruling. He predicted that it would lead to a flood of secret money. Justice Alito
it didn't
was
go over
sitting,
well. He had the head nods and the grimaces there in the row.
Yeah, exactly. And then now he can show the videotape, because he was actually right about that.
Let me ask you, our Jim Acosta is reporting that after the speech, the president is traveling to Idaho, Kansas, red states, and the goal is to engage with people who disagree with him. Isn't that something you do before running for re-election? Why do that now? Because his policies don't seem to indicate that's where this White House is headed, with immigration reform, with Cuba, net neutrality, a lot of other things they've sort of done it a go it alone. We want to appeal to our base. We're not so much about engaging all points of view right now. Why go to the red states?
Well, I think it'll make for an interesting trip. I think that from what we know, for example, about his tax proposal, if it's really a middle-class tax cut coupled with an increase in the capital gains tax, that might go over surprisingly well in a place like Idaho or Kansas. And I think, you know, it's true the president isn't running for re-election, but the way he governs and the way he puts forward his arguments over the next 2 years will help set the stage for the 2016 election and beyond. In a way, it's the beginning of the post-Obama era, and he wants to get his 2 cents in about what the agenda should be for that.
So this is the first time he's speaking to a Congress completely controlled by Republicans. It's also the first time that he's speaking to Congress for the State of the Union, where in some ways people think things are looking up, or more people think things are looking up for the country. How does that shape how he delivers the speech, and how careful does he have to be? Because there are still plenty of people who have real tough times in this country right now.
Well, you're exactly right. And he has been very careful in the past, and I think maybe too careful, about not pointing to positive news for seeming. He's been worried about looking out of touch with the challenges people face. But of course, we know that the economy is picking up steam. You're even seeing increases these days in wages and median income. The GDP is going strong, and also the United States economy is in much better shape than Europe and some of our industrial competitors. I think that he will want to and should point with pride to that kind of thing. It's now the first time to give a talk like this after the financial crisis, and also after the sort of deficit panic that occupied Washington for so many years, because the deficit's going down too. In other words, I think I'd be quite surprised if he didn't surprise us with an optimistic and positive tone.
Level with me, having written 4 of these, do you get jitters the night of a State of the Union when a president goes up? Do you get worried that you forgot to write something?
Post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, it's a very exciting time because so much goes into each word. It's not just applause, it's not just trying to write a good speech, but it's really the policy proposals for the whole government. And I'll say that, for me at least, about 2/3 of the way through the speech, when it was clear that the teleprompter had not broken, that was the moment of relaxation. So I feel their pain.
They weren't going to change the locks on you when you went into work the next
day. Exactly.
Michael Waldman, great to have you here with us. I really appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Thank you.